Good morning. Today is Saturday, and I'm going to do Act 4 with you. I might tell you right now that on the test I'll have some questions based on not Macbeth, but on comments I make during the video, and I hope you will be able to answer them. One of the ones, well, in studying Macbeth, I feel kind of grateful that reading something that is so rich and so universal deepens my knowledge and understanding. One of the very important things about great literature is that it should be universal. That means that it has a message for anyone at any time. And I do think that Macbeth and his wife and their interaction and their ambition and the fact that evil leads to more evil is a universal concept. So do keep that in mind. This also reflects a little bit on the Canterbury Tales. You know, most of us who are teachers have a favorite character, and some people say it's the wife of Bath, but she just kind of annoys me. Most of the teachers prefer the cleric or the cleric, you know, because they say, gladly would he learn and gladly teach. Those of us who are teachers have to also be learners or students all of our lives. And learning is something that is very exciting to us, to feel that we have a deeper understanding, a greater awareness of literature, but not just literature, of what it means to be human. Now today in Act 4, I do think that Macbeth may be the most exciting of Shakespeare's plays. One good thing about it is that it's the shortest. It's actually only about half as long as Hamlet, although many people prefer Hamlet. But I think in Macbeth, there's more action going on. And when Act 4 starts with Scene 1, very important scene, which really encourages Macbeth to go even further into blood. You know, he says, I am in blood stepped in so far that it's just as easy to continue on as to go back. But the witches are gathered and they're crying, 'tis time, 'tis time. And this is where you get the famous cooking up evil cauldron thing, where they say, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. And then you get a whole bunch of the ingredients, such as like eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blindworm's sting, lizard's leg and howlet's wing, for a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth boil and bubble. And they all say double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. And then the third witch gives more horrible things that go in, even finger of birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab. Make the gruel thick and slab. I think you could have fun doing this scene. And then the double, double, toil and trouble. And cool it with a baboon's blood, then the charm is firm and good. And then Hecate, which they say Shakespeare always said Hecate, she says, oh, well done. And then they have music and a song. But most critics believe that this was inserted, that it really doesn't have much to do with the play, but folks like to see witches dancing around. But the second witch has another famous line, by the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Some famous science fiction writer has a book called Something Wicked This Way Comes. Open locks, whoever knocks. When Macbeth comes in, what are you doing? They say, a deed without a name. And then he tells them, he wants to know the future. I conjure you by that which you profess, however you come to know it, answer me. He says, I don't care if getting my answer means that terrible storms and bad things happen. I want to know. And first witch, speak, demand, we'll answer. And they say, would you rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters? Well, it seems evident. Again, the witches are in cahoots with the devil. And he says, call him, let me see him. Now, I will be expecting you to know the three visions. And the first one is an armed head. That means a head with a helmet on it. And he says, "Tell me, thou unknown power." The first which said, he knows your thoughts. Hear his speech, but say naught. The first apparition says, "Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth, beware Macduff. Beware the Thane of Fife, dismiss me enough," and disappears. And Macbeth is elated. "Whate'er thou art, for thy good caution thanks. Thou hast harped my fear aright. I have been fearful of Macduff, and you're reinforcing this. But one word more, the first which says, he will not be commanded." You know, Macbeth, you're not going to tell us what to do. Here's another, more potent, more powerful than the first. We get a bloody child who says, "Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth, be bloody, bold, and resolute." Be bloody, go on killing people, bold and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. And Macbeth says, "Then live, Macduff, what need I fear of thee?" I don't need to fear you, Macduff. I won't have to kill you. On the other hand, it'd be safer. But yet I'll make a sure and double sure, and take a bond of fate. Thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. Again, that echo of sleep throughout the play. The third apparition is a child crowned with a tree in his hand. What is this that rises like the issue of a king? He has on a crown with a tree in his hand, and wears upon his baby brow the round and top of sovereignty. Listen, but speak not to it. And the third apparition says, "Be lion mettled, have the spirit of a lion, proud and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Burnham Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him." Macbeth says that'll never be. You can't make the forest rise up and go. I'm safe. And our high-placed Macbeth shall live the lease of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom. He thinks, none of this can't happen, and so I will get to live out my lifetime and die peacefully. Yet my heart throbs to know one thing. Tell me, if your art can tell so much, shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom? This has been one of the scorpions in his mind. They all say, "Seek to know no more." Macbeth said, "I will be satisfied. Deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know." Well, it's ironic that he's saying, I'll curse you. Well, of course, the witchy people are already cursed. They are associates of evil and of the devil. The cauldron sinks, and why sinks the cauldron? And what noise is this? And the witches take great glee in saying, "Show, show, show. Show his eyes and grieve his heart. Come like shadows, so depart." And then we have a show of 8 kings, and the 8th king has a glass or mirror in his hand, and Banquo is there. He doesn't look too good either, but Macbeth recognizes the first king. "Thou art too like the spirit of Banquo down. Thy crown does sear mine eyeballs, and thy hair, though other," he's commenting on the kings, "is like the first. A third is like the former. Filthy hags, why do you show me this?" Well, he had insisted they show him. A fourth, "Start eyes, will the line stretch out to doom?" A seventh, "I'll see no more." And yet the 8th appears, who bears a glass, a mirror, which shows me many more. And some I see that twofold balls and treble scepters carry. Horrible sight! Now I see 'tis true, for the blood-boltered Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for his. Well, that's Banquo is really an interesting character to play, but he's there, still bloody, and smiling. And this really refers to history. King James followed Elizabeth on the throne. He was actually the grandson of Henry VII. And so Queen Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots, his mother, were first cousins. I think I'm right on that. Well, for many people, Mary Queen of Scots was the rightful Queen of England because Elizabeth was born when her father was really still married to Catherine of Aragon, because the Catholic Church didn't recognize that divorce. And at one point, Henry VIII declared his two daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, as illegitimate. So Elizabeth was always very unsure of her place. And she was afraid that Catholic countries would come and take the throne from her because they felt that Mary Queen of Scots was the rightful queen. And, it didn't pay to make Elizabeth anxious. So Mary Queen of Scots was beheaded. But her son James, who had become James VI of Scotland, was by Elizabeth appointed to be the next heir, and he became James I of England. Now, when they say he has the twofold, it would be like an orb. If you've ever seen the Infant of Prague, he has an orb with a cross on it. James has the orb. It's like a little mini world that signifies Scotland and England. And he has a threefold scepter. The kings of England at the time liked to proclaim that they were kings of Great Britain, Ireland, and France. They were not shy about taking people's things. Anyway, Shakespeare at this point is sucking up to James I, because James I was a descendant of Banquo, and there were about 8 generations in between. And Macbeth says, "Is this so?" And the first witch, "Yes, but why are you Macdade? Why are you amazed? Come, cheer we up his sprites." Now then they have a dance. Guys, this is an impossibly stupid thing to have at this point. But the groundlings, the people who didn't pay much to get in to the play, they liked this kind of thing. And Macbeth says, "Where are they? Gone. Let this pernicious hour stand aye accursed in the calendar." And then he calls his attendant, Lennox, and some people have come to tell him that Macduff has fled to England. And Macbeth has an aside around line 165 where he says, "Time, you anticipate my dread exploits." What he means is that he didn't act in time, and so Macduff has escaped. "From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. When I decide to do evil, I'm going to do it right away. And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done. All right, I'm going to surprise the castle of Macduff, seize on everything he owns, kill his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. No boasting like a fool. This deed I'll do before this purpose cools. But no more sights." When Macbeth killed Duncan early in the play, you could see a lot more of his conscience. Now his main thing is to act quickly so that he can get something done before his conscience catches up with him. But this is really reprehensible. Why would he kill Macduff's wife and children and anybody related to him? Well, to get revenge on Macduff, because Macduff is not obedient to him. Now, the next scene, too, many people find this very touching, but it starts out with Lady Macduff asking her cousin Ross, why did he leave? And Lady Macduff says, "His flight was madness. If he cared about us, he wouldn't leave us like this. He's lacking the natural touch. All is fear and nothing is the love. All is the fear and nothing is the love. As little is the wisdom where the flight so runs against all reason. How could he leave us undefended?" Well, probably Macduff didn't really anticipate that Macbeth would be so bloody-minded as to kill his family. And Ross says, "Your husband is noble, wise, judicious, and best knows the fits of the season. Cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves." And he says he really went because he's hoping to make things better. And Lady Macduff looks at her little boy and said, "Father he is, and yet he's fatherless. His father isn't around. Ross feels overcome by emotion, and then she starts talking to her son, and they have a little dialogue where she's kind of teasing him, and he's answering back. And the messenger comes in and warns Lady Macduff to flee, to get away, because bad things are coming, bad people are coming. Around line 80, Lady Macbeth says, "Where will I go? I have done no harm, but I remember now I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable or praised. To do good sometimes accounted dangerous folly. Why then, alas, do I put up the womanly defense to say I have done no harm?" That's a very cynical line, that the fact that you're innocent doesn't mean anything. What are these faces? And the murderers come in. Where is your husband? And she's feisty. She says, "I hope in such a place so unsanctified, where such as thou mayst find him." And he's a traitor. And the son says, "Thou liest, thou shag-eared villain." Well, you don't mess with villains who are out for revenge. And so he says, "What, you egg?" and stabs him. Young fry of treachery. I'm not sure, but I think baby fish are called fry. He has killed me, mother. Run away, I pray you. And so Lady Macbeth runs off crying murder, and they run after her. Notice here that they say that later versions, later presentations, did not show the boy being killed on stage. But probably in Shakespeare's time they did. They had gotten a bit away from the Greek idea of not showing violent things. But then the next scene, some people find it a bit tedious, but it is very important. This is scene 3. Malcolm, who is the son of Duncan, and really the heir to the throne, says to Macduff, "Let's find a shade, and there weep our sad bosoms empty." He seems very languorous, not very lively, and Macduff says, "No, let us rather hold fast the mortal sword, and like good men, bestride our downfall and birthdom. Each new morn, things are bad in Scotland." And Malcolm says, "What I believe, I'll wail. What no, believe. And what I can redress, as I shall find the time to, friend, I will." Maybe what you're saying is true. This tyrant, whose name blisters our tongue, was once thought honest. You have loved him well. He said, "You used to be a great friend of his. He has not touched you yet." Now there's irony there, because we know that Macduff's family has been murdered. And you see, for Malcolm, his father was murdered. But he's saying to Macduff, you haven't suffered the loss of loved ones as I have. I am young, but something you may deserve of him through me. Maybe you want to get benefit from him by turning me in. Now remember, the last time we saw Malcolm was right after his father had been murdered, and he recognized that he could not trust anyone. And of course that lack of trust has just become even more enlarged. And he thinks, well, Macbeth, what if you were coming to try to lure me back to Scotland? Because Macduff, why are you trying to lure me back to Scotland? Because so that Macbeth would reward you. And you're offering me up like a poor, weak, innocent lamb to appease the angry god. And Macduff says, "I am not treacherous." And Malcolm, "But Macbeth is." "I can't tell what you are. That which you are, my thoughts cannot transpose." Angels are bright still, though the brightest fell. Though all things foul would bear the crown of grace, yet grace must still look so. Macduff says, "I've lost my hopes. I can tell you're not going to come through for us. Perchance even there, where I did find my doubts. Why in that rawness left you wife and child, those precious motives, those strong knots of love, without leave-taking? Well, yeah, you have to understand I am suspicious of you. Why did you leave your wife and our children unprotected? I pray you, let not my jealousies be your dishonors, but mine own safeties." He says, "I have to be careful. I have to protect myself. You may be rightly just, whatever I shall think." It's interesting that Malcolm is saying to Macduff, "Look, I may suspect you, But that doesn't take away from the fact that you are what you are. Maybe you are very loyal. Maybe I should trust you, but I have to protect myself. And Macduff says, bleed, poor country, for goodness dare not check thee. And then he says to Malcolm, well, fare thee well, Lord. I would not be the villain that thou thinkest, for the whole space that's in the tyrant's grasp, and the rich east to boot. He said, if you're going to be suspicious of me like this, I'm out of here. But Malcolm says, well, don't be offended. I see what's going on in our country, and I know that I think withal there would be hands uplifted in my sight. I know I could count on having soldiers. The King of England would give me some. Yet my poor country, but he said, but even if I came back, maybe it wouldn't be such a good thing, because I would be worse than the situation now. And Macduff says, what do you mean? Well, he said, if I went back, I would be much worse than Macbeth. After you got me, you would think that Macbeth was practically sinless. And Macduff says, not in the legion of horrid hell can come a devil more damned in evils to top Macbeth. And Malcolm says, okay, he's bloody, luxurious, avaricious, false, deceitful, sudden, malicious, smacking of every sin that has a name. But there's no bottom, none, in my voluptuousness. He says, I am such a lecher that I would, be unto all your women and so on, and it would be very unpleasant for you all. And Macduff says, well, okay, that's a terrible thing. Boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny. Any kind of intemperance or addiction, I suppose. It has emptied many a throne, been responsible for the fall of many kings, but, well, let's face it, there are probably ladies enough who would like to go to bed with you. And Malcolm said, that's not all. I'm also very avaricious, and if I came back to Scotland, I would take your land, your jewels, and anything I got would make me even more avaricious and greedy. And Macduff says, well, that's even worse than being lustful. But we have a lot of stuff, and all these are portable with other graces weighed. We could live with your being lustful and avaricious if you have other graces. And Malcolm says, but I have none. The king becoming graces as justice, verity, temperance, stableness, and so on, I have no relish of them, but abound in the division of each separate crime, acting it many ways. Nay, he said, had I power, I should pour the sweet milk of concord into hell. Anything that was peaceful, I would pour into hell. Uproar the universal peace, confound all unity in earth. All I would do would be to create division and more confusion. Macduff said, oh, Scotland, Scotland. Malcolm said, well, I told you what I'm like. If such a one be fit to govern, speak. I am as I have spoken. And Macduff says, fit to govern? No, not fit to live. And one of the things we admire about Macduff is he's pretty straightforward and plain spoken. And then he gives him a lecture. He said, how can you be like this and blaspheme your breed? Your royal father was a most sainted king. Your mother was often on her knees. He said, fare thee well. These evils that repeatest upon thyself have banished me from Scotland. O my breast, thy hope ends here. Macduff is genuinely upset and discouraged, downhearted, because, well, then Malcolm comes around and says, Macduff, this noble passion hath from my soul wiped the black scruples, reconciled my thoughts to thy good truth and honor. The fact that you are willing to just leave because you were so, well, revolted by what I told you shows me that you're telling the truth. You have to keep in mind that Macbeth has sent people here to try to lure me back to Scotland to kill me. And I have to be very careful. But the truth is, I'm yet unknown to woman. I've never lied or even coveted what was mine, never broke my faith, would not betray the devil to his fellow, and delight no less in truth than life. Well, Macduff is hearing this, and his head is whirling. My first false speaking was this upon myself. He said, the first lie I really told was telling you all these lies about myself. What I am truly is thine and my poor country's to command. And he said, I'm already getting an army together. Now we'll together and the chance of goodness be like our warranted quarrel. Why are you silent? Well, Macduff, as I said, his head is still spinning, and he says, such welcome and unwelcome things at once, 'tis hard to reconcile. He had just given up on any hope of having Malcolm free Scotland. And now Malcolm says, no, I wasn't, I was just kidding. Well, I don't think he said I was just kidding. But you can see where Malcolm was coming from. He didn't know for sure that Macduff wasn't one of Macbeth's agents, come to lure him back under any pretense. And it was only when Macduff says, well, forget it, we don't want you, that he realized that Macduff was sincere. Then a doctor comes in, and this is another flatter King James kind of story. Apparently, Edward the Confessor, who was a very saintly person, had the ability by touching people, this was the divine aspect of kings, by touching them and getting rid of a disease. And they say the king is going to do that. Well, people would get James I to touch them, and he said, no, I don't really think I have magical powers, but I will pray for you. And Macduff says, see who comes here. Malcolm says, he's my countryman, but I don't know him. Well, he would have been dressed like a Scotsman, probably wearing a kilt. And Macduff, my ever-gentle cousin, welcome hither. And Macduff, right away, of course, wants knowledge about Scotland. Stand Scotland where it did? Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself, it cannot be called our mother, line 190, but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing is once seen to smile. They say, when ignorance is bliss, 'tis falling to be wise. He's saying anybody who knows anything, anybody who knows nothing is the only one who can smile. And it's really bad. Macduff says, oh, relation, too nice and yet too true. I know it's accurate. What's the newest grief? And Ross says, well, there's so many griefs that the present grief mocks the grief of the previous the previous hour. Macduff says, how does my wife? And Ross says, why, well, and all my children, well, too. The tyrant has not battered at their peace. And, you admire Macduff that he's very anxious about his family. No, they were well at peace when I did leave them. Now, is Ross actually lying? Well, it's very hard to tell someone this terrible news. And the fact is that when Ross left them, they were alive. And Macduff suspects something right away. Be not a niggard of your speech, how goes it? Now, that word niggard means being cheap or chintzy or holding back. There was an amusing case once where someone was fired for using that word because someone thought he had used the N-word. So today we are very reluctant to use it. He wants more information. And Ross says, well, when I came hither to transport the tidings, I heard that there were many worthy fellows out, and I think Macbeth is getting up an army. Malcolm says but he says, if you came, people would rise up in your defense, Malcolm. And he says, we're coming thither, and we have Seward and so on. And Ross said, would I could answer this comfort with the like. And then he finally admits, I have words that would be howled out in the desert air, where hearing should not latch them. They should be howled in the desert where nobody can hear them. What concern they? Macduff says, the general cause, or is it a fee grief due to some single breast? Is it the general state of Scotland or something pertaining to a particular person? And Ross again prevaricates. He says, no mind that's honest, but in it shares some woe, though the main part pertains to you alone. And Macduff says, if it be mine, keep it not from me. Quickly, let me have it. And Ross says, may your ears not despise my tongue forever, which will possess them with the heaviest sound that ever yet they heard. Macduff says, I guess at it. And Ross says, your castle is surprised, your wife and babes savagely slaughtered. To relate the manner were on the quarry of these murdered deer, to add the death of you. If I told you exactly how it happened, you would die. Now I find this very moving, this passage. Malcolm says, merciful heaven. Now Macduff has pulled his hat down over his face, or over his brows. What, man, ne'er pull your hat upon your brows, give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers the o'erfraught heart and bids it break. You know, if you don't speak of your sorrow and just keep it in, your heart will break. Now, just a little aside here. Grief is different for everybody, and some people, it helps them if they can talk about their grief, but it doesn't help everybody, and you have to be sensitive to that. If someone suffers greatly, if it's someone, you know, people who are grieving sometimes feel they have to say, you say, how are you? Well, I'm doing better. Well, if you really care, you might say, no, how are you really? And then they might be willing to open up. But sometimes it's too hard. So grief it reminds me of the opening line of The Go-Between. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. Sometimes wanting to talk to someone about grief is too hard because it brings too many memories. But Macduff says, my children too, he's hoping to get a different answer. Wife, children, servants, all that could be found. And I must be from thence, my wife killed too? I have said. Malcolm said, be comforted, let's make us medicines of our great revenge to cure this deadly grief. And Macduff recognized, why don't you just get really angry about this? And Macduff says something very wise. He says, he has no children. You know, Malcolm has not been married, hasn't got children. He can't understand. And again he asks, all my pretty ones, did you say all? Oh, hell-kite, all? What, all my pretty chickens and their dam at one fell swoop? And Malcolm says, dispute it like a man, bear up. But Macduff says, I shall do so, I will, but I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things were that were most precious to me. It says what it says. Did heaven look on and would not take their part? Sinful Macduff, they were all struck for thee. He blames himself for their death, and he is the cause of their death. Not that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine. Fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rest them now. I mean, it's bad enough to lose loved ones through murder, but to know that it was because of you, because Macbeth hated you so much. And Malcolm says, be this the whetstone of your sword. This should really stir you up for vengeance. Let grief convert to anger. Blunt not the heart, enrage it. And Macduff says, I could play the woman with my eyes and braggart with my tongue. I could weep and I could talk about what I'm going to do, but gentle heavens, cut short all intermission. There isn't time for that now. Front to front, bring thou this fiend of Scotland and myself, within my sword's length set him. If he escape, heaven forgive him too. And Malcolm says, this tune goes manly. I actually find Malcolm very dense, in relating to Macduff. I can understand his being suspicious at first. He had cause to be suspicious, but basically he doesn't seem to understand how terrible it is for Macduff to have had his family murdered. But Malcolm says, come, go ye to the king. Our power is ready. Our lack is nothing but our leave. We just need the king's permission. Macbeth is ripe for shaking, and the powers above put on their instruments. Receive what cheer you may. The night is long that never finds the day. And we all know that. The night is long that never finds the day. And so that completes Act 4, and we have just one more act, and then the wind-up. All right, so I probably will try to do Act 5 today because I am so behind on library work that people are making remarks about it, and they should, because they're waiting for books that I need to catalog. So you could actually go through all the